This past weekend me and my partner decided to go on our usual camping spot. It's very low-key, never usually anyone up this mountain besides 1 or 2 people at a time, and even at that time they're miles away from your campground. This past weekend, just like every year, we brought my parents' little elderly dog. We set up camp, ate some food and drank some beer around the campsite. When we arrived prior to this, we scoped out the area to see how busy it was. There was absolutely nobody on site. The entire mountain campgrounds were entirely empty. We're used to having one hunter or fisher in the area at least, but we've never not seen one person the entire trip. So we sat around the fire completely relaxed with my little dog nearby. When we decide to get into bed, my usually very complacent pup refuses to settle inside the tent. It's pretty hot this time of year, so we had the tent unzipped with just the mesh covering the opening to let some breeze in. But my pup was looking through the mesh and sniffing, zoning in on something. We decide to get up and check out the camp for whatever he's looking at. We don't see anything, so we decide to sit by the fire and chill. When my sleepy pup unsettles suddenly with his hackle straight up on end, growling a deep growl into one direction of the woods. We decided to grab the hunting knife and axe and listen closely. He snarled and barked vigorously, which took us by surprise because he's been completely comfortable every other year. After a few hours of him acting on high alert, we decide to flip the truck lights on to illuminate our camp as we're surrounded by darkness. We were listening intently, trying to figure out what he's seeing or hearing. After a few minutes he lays down and alarms us again a few minutes later, startling us to the point where we make a run for the truck by how aggressively he's been trying to. My dog is warning something. We wait, our hearts pounding inside the truck, trying to see what's out there. After 30 minutes, we assume whatever it is has passed on. After we reposition ourselves in front of the fire again, my dog's hackles are up and we hear the loudest tree branch snap a mere 10 feet away from us in the pitch-black wilderness. Again, we hop in the truck with the dog and decide we better leave. As earlier that night, we were hearing wolves hunting for a few hours and their howl is echoing the woods. Our main concern was it being a cougar, as they're commonly seen in this area, and there had been a lot of attacks on unsuspecting victims. Our main thought was something was stalking us for a long time without moving on. We told my partner's parents that we decided it's better to be safe than sorry, and we were mocked extensively, but we were armed with very minimal weapons, not anything that could handle a mountain lion or a pack of wolves. We recalled chicken shits the entire weekend and mocked over it. Regardless, I'm glad to have left the campsite when we did.
A group of college students decided to challenge fate and spend the night inside the old, now abandoned city college, a red brick building that had witnessed decades of laughter, studies, and perhaps even dark secrets. The group's leader, Jake, convinced his friends to join him in this nocturnal adventure. He was the self-assured type, always ready to defy conventions. With him were Stephanie, his intelligent and bright girlfriend, Brian, the athletic guy, and Sarah, the dreamy artist. They entered the building through an open window at the back, their curiosity at its peak. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting ghostly shadows on dusty corridors. The silence was oppressive, broken only by their stealthy footsteps. They decided to explore the library, a place of wisdom and, as legends told, paranormal presences. The books seemed to watch them with invisible eyes as they flipped through the pages of old volumes. A rustle in the air made them feel like someone, or something, was observing them. As they traversed the corridors, Sarah noticed a painting that seemed out of place. It depicted a dark figure with eyes following their every move. The macabre art was so detailed it almost seemed alive. Emily, with her knowledge of symbols, noticed an ancient glyph beneath the painting, but they couldn't decipher its meaning. The group decided to head to the theater hall, a place of performances and shows that had hosted moments of joy and tragedy. broken chairs, and abandoned old set pieces created an eerie atmosphere. Brian jokingly mentioned the possibility of past actors' ghosts still performing in the darkness. The cold of the night became more pronounced inside the theater, as if an icy shadow had taken residence. Jake, stubborn as ever, suggested a game. Try to summon a spirit using an antique mirror they found backstage. As they stared at the reflection, laughter turned into an anxious silence. Flickering lights and wind howling through cracks in the walls created a surreal atmosphere. Suddenly, they heard footsteps coming from the stage. A flash of fear crossed their eyes, but Jake urged them forward. The group followed the steps, leading them to a hidden corridor behind the stage. A rusty door opened slowly, revealing a dusty room containing forgotten objects and faded photographs of old shows. A cold wind blew through the room, slamming doors and windows. A shadow materialized in front of them, a figure with a distorted appearance. "Abandon this place," it whispered with a spectral voice. It was the soul of an actor who, according to legends, had tragically lost his life on stage. Terrified, the students tried to escape, but the door slammed shut, trapping them in the room. Tension filled the air as the figure approached slowly. Emily, with her intelligence, remembered the glyph beneath the painting. In an act of desperation, she repeated it aloud. A flash of light enveloped the room, dispersing the shadow and opening the door. When they finally emerged, the school had returned to its abandoned state. The students, with clouded minds, looked around, wondering if they had truly crossed the boundary between the world of the living and the dead. Their nocturnal adventure inside the college had revealed a dark truth, a story of passions and tragedies that continued to live through the centuries. And as the rays of dawn pierced the sky, the group walked away, carrying the weight of the secrets that the night had unveiled.
My family would take yearly vacations to the same hotel every summer. It would always be me, my wife, and my 2 little boys. The summer of 2017 was the creepiest vacation of all because of the horrifying encounter with a creepy family at the hotel. When we arrived at the hotel after unpacking, the kids went to the water park, whereas my wife and I sat on the chairs around the pool. When the night was falling, I went to get the boys and get ready for dinner. After searching for some time, I was able to find Tom, the older of the 2. I asked him where David was. He told me that he saw David going to the other side of that park along with a strange person. I searched for him for a while and finally saw him. He was in the back corner of the park, where a few chairs were set up, talking to a small boy who looked about his age. Sitting in the chairs next to him was a strange couple that seemed to be the boy's parents. I walked up and briefly introduced myself, but they didn't respond aside from giving me a slight smile. Then I held David with my hand and took him to the room. I was afraid about this situation. David told me something strange. He said that the strange couple had told me to come for dinner at their place. And from the way he was telling this, David seemed interested as well. We ignored this after that and went for dinner at a nearby place. When we got back, we got in the elevator and made our way up to our floor, but as the elevator doors opened, David's new friend and his mother were standing there as if they were waiting for the elevator to go down. As soon as we got out, the mother looked at me with a short smile and asked if David could join them for dinner tonight. I briefly looked at my wife, who seemed just as confused and concerned as I was, and then I looked back at the lady and denied it kindly. Her smile faded as she turned and walked down the opposite hallway. It was strange that they were creepily waiting for us by the elevator the whole time just to ask about dinner. When we got inside our room, we pulled David aside and strictly told him not to go near that family without one of us with him. He seemed a bit upset about it, but he agreed. Eventually, we all got ready for bed and turned out the lights. A few hours into the night, I was shaken awake. I jolted up, pretty on edge, and I saw Tom next to me, still shaking my arm. I asked him if he was okay, and Tom responded quietly, whispering to me that David was talking to someone at the door. I immediately jumped out of bed and turned the corner leading to the front door. From the short glimpse I got before yelling at him, I could tell he was in the process of figuring out how to unlock the door, and I could hear a faint voice on the other side. I sprinted towards him, screaming for him to back away from the door. David jumped back, frightened by the volume of my voice. I slammed against the door, hearing footsteps sprinting down the hall as I finished unlocking the door and swung it open. I know I should have just stayed in the room and called for help, but I was in such a rage that all I wanted was to confront that creep. As I stood outside the room, I saw someone peeking from behind the wall at the end of the hallway. I tried to catch up, but once I turned the corner, there was no one on the other side. After looking around for a few minutes, I ran back to our room and met my wife, who was already awake due to the chaos of the situation. I told her to lock the door as I was going to go to the front desk to inform them of the incident. By the time I got down to the lobby, my adrenaline was starting to fade out, and I was trying to calm myself down so I could explain what happened. There was a young woman at the counter that I talked to, and I could tell she had never dealt with a situation like this. She called a security guard over to talk to me, as well as her manager. As we discussed everything, I told them about the couple that was near my kid in the evening. They told us that nobody else was staying in the same building complex as we did that night. And for that specific night, besides our kids, there were no other people but us and staff on the floor. They had no security cameras in the hallway, but the entrance and exit camera didn't get any footage of that woman or couple or that kid coming near the elevator. I told them a description of the man and woman, but none of them knew anyone who fit that description.
So, I'm a 25-year-old male, and this happened just last year in the summer. I was taking a road trip from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Los Angeles, California. The reason for this trip was to visit my old friend from childhood who I hadn't seen in years. Moving away from one of your best friends is enough to make anyone feel lonely and sad. I'd only saw him once a year when I had time off from work, so this trip was very important to me. If I remember correctly, I was driving down a long stretch of road somewhere in Arizona when my car suddenly dies out of nowhere. Being rightfully pissed off, I hit my dashboard, trying to get the damn thing to start. Unfortunately, however, it's an old car, so I knew the chances of it starting up were slim. Eventually, I get out of my car and look underneath the hood. The car's battery had been covered in battery acid and it spread through the other components. I was stuck on an empty road in the middle of nowhere with nothing but desert and cliffs, so you could imagine the sheer panic I was in. I take out my phone to try to get a hold of Matt to see if he could come get me. When we were younger teens, we'd always have this little slogan when trying to reach each other. It went something along the lines of, "So and so, do you copy?" And I'd repeat the catchphrase, attempting to reach him. "Hey Matt, do you copy? I'm in a bit of a pickle here." However, signal around here was basically non-existent, so I had no other choice but to walk to the nearest town, 10 miles up ahead. All the while, I'm still trying to reach Matt, but there was no luck. About 15 minutes into my walk, I look behind me and notice two headlights and in the distance, getting closer and closer. It took me a second to realize it was a car and I flagged them down, practically begging for help. Believe it or not, it seemed as if my prayers came true as the car starts to slow down and pulls up next to me. Inside was an older-looking gentleman, and in the back were two younger men with a middle-aged woman wearing sunglasses in the middle seat. The two men seemed to be carrying her as she appeared to be asleep. The driver asked how they could be of help, and I explained my situation to them. One of the men in the back seat had said something about how that sounded like a you problem and that they'd be no help. I apologized, thanking them for their time, and I told them I'd be on my way. However, that's when I noticed the woman in the car. She looked slumped over and just appeared to be out of it. I then asked in a direct time to the driver, "Is everything all right with her?" He then looks at the man, looks at me and says, "Nah, she's dead, but why is that your concern?" One of the men in the back takes off her sunglasses, revealing her face. The second I saw her face, I could now see why she was deceased. Her lifeless body limped over the two men with her mouth hung open as if it had been broken. The driver then looks at me and says 6 words that have haunted me ever since. Calling the cops would be a mistake. I then back off and start running back to my car as the other car sped off until they were too far away to be seen. Thankfully, my car willingly started back up again, where I was able to go to the next town and get a new battery. I obviously did inform the police about my encounter and gave them an exact description of what the men looked like. Up until now, however, there have been unfortunately no leads as to who might have been responsible. In the end, I did get to see my friend and nothing had happened again while on that trip. I'm not sure what they were planning on doing, but I knew my life was in danger with whatever it was. The fact that I didn't bring a gun with me made me even more vulnerable for something to happen. The scariest thing about this whole thing was when the car drove past me where I was able to see the driver. He stared at me with this unnerving grin and kept it until he was far enough. That grin will forever be burned into the back of my head. I'm just glad I didn't get hurt or possibly have something potentially worse happen. There are truly some sick and twisted people in this world that we just have to live with. It's unfortunately a harsh reality of life.
During one summer break from college, I decided to offer my spare room as an Airbnb. It seemed like a great way to earn some extra cash at the time. Everything was going well until I received a booking request from a guy named Raphael. His profile seemed normal enough, so I accepted the reservation. He arrived late into the night. He looked quite different from his profile picture, which was quite shocking. The man before me had a ragged appearance, his jacket muddy, his face full of scars and clearly one too many tattoos than necessary. I thought nothing of it as everyone has their preferences. But I do remember thinking that there was something unsettling about him. I showed him around the house and then his room. He turned to me and asked which room was mine. For some reason, he seemed more interested in that than looking at his own. I got a very bad gut feeling, but decided to think that he was just asking in case he needed something. I told him my room was just down the corridor and he smiled a peculiar smile at me. It was unnerving, but he was here now and I didn't want to put myself in any danger by doing anything to offend him as he was twice my size. I smiled back and told him that I would be heading to bed as I had work early in the morning. I went to my room and immediately locked the door. Offering Airbnb to random strangers seemed like a good idea at the time. My room is a long one and has a sliding door to the patio on its far end. I usually keep the curtains open so that I can see my plants with the screen door closed. Despite my uneasy feelings, I somehow managed to fall asleep that night. The next morning, I unlocked my door cautiously and went outside. I guessed that my guest Raphael was still asleep since there was no one in the living room. He came out in a bit and after exchanging pleasantries, told me that he was in town for some business and would only be here later in the night. I felt very stupid at my reaction from the previous evening. Despite his appearance, he was clearly harmless. I went about my day. After work, I did some groceries then came back home. There was no sign of the guy. I finished doing my laundry and some housework. I usually pick out a movie before bed if I'm not too busy. I found a good documentary on Netflix and began to watch. In the midst of the documentary, my guest returned and wordlessly settled on the sofa beside me without any invitation. It was weird, but I decided not to let my thoughts wander and told myself this is how just some people are. I offered him popcorn and he ate some without a word. I tried to make some small talk as an attempt to start a conversation, but he didn't seem interested and only gave dry replies. After the movie ended, I bid him good night and went to my room. I was so tired that I almost immediately fell asleep. It must have been very late when I woke up feeling really thirsty. As I reached for the water bottle that I kept at my bedside, I had the sudden jitters of being watched. Instantly, my eyes wandered to the sliding door, and sure enough, there was a dark figure standing there, watching me. I couldn't make out his face due to the dark, but I completely froze. As if sensing my eyes on him, he slowly walked away from the door. my heart was thumping really loud and I was sweating like crazy. I immediately hopped out of bed and ran to the sliding door. After making sure it was locked, I drew the curtains. I almost jumped the very next instant when there was a sharp knock on my door. I held my breath as the guy continued to knock. Then he tried the doorknob, trying to get inside the room. Thankfully, I had locked it before I went to bed. His knocks were persistent and became louder until he was heavily pounding the door. I yelled at him, threatening to call the cops, and all went silent. I saw the shadow of his feet leaving the door. I dialed 911 before the guy returned or broke down my door. The cops arrived soon enough and searched the entire house. There was no sign of the guy or any evidence that he had been there. Upon showing his profile to the cops, I found out that the guy had a criminal record. I still shudder thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't locked my door that night. I lived alone in a small house in a small community with a couple of dozen houses in the area, but it's a few miles away from town. I'd been living in that same house for about 4 years, and for the most part, I hadn't had any issues. I liked not being in a busy area and just having trees surrounding the community. I worked a normal 9-to-5 job and lived a normal life until everything took a tragic turn after a horrifying incident that changed me completely. This all happened last year by the end of July. It was raining for a whole day when I went to work, and it was still raining when I got back home. I got home, opened my umbrella, and collected all the stuff from the yard, including my mowing equipment, to save them from rain. I was holding an umbrella in one hand and had equipment in the other. While placing it in the shed, I noticed someone standing on the other side of the road below a flickering street light. The man was standing still and seemed like a shadowy figure. I got afraid to look at him and yelled at him to go away, but he didn't listen. I decided to ignore him and headed inside, dropped my bag on the kitchen chair, and then started searching through the pantry for something to eat for dinner. As I looked through the shelves, though, I noticed something odd. The box of cereal I had for breakfast wasn't where I remembered putting it. Actually, it wasn't anywhere at all. I looked around the kitchen for a minute, just confused and thinking that I was losing my mind. I got frustrated after a bit and gave up, making a quick dinner and trying to enjoy the rest of the night. At midnight, my eyes were getting heavy, so I turned off the TV and stumbled into the kitchen to fill up my water bottle before bed. Then I went over to the back door to turn off the back porch lights. But just before I switched them off, I saw something far back at the edge of the yard. I saw that same figure standing among the trees just past the reach of the lights. I had no way to get a closer look, so I just stood there looking at him for a few seconds until I saw him walk away deeper into the forest. It was really strange and gave me chills, but I wasn't sure what exactly even happened. I was more confused than anything. I switched the lights off and went to bed. In the morning, I got ready for work again and went downstairs. But when I opened the pantry, the box of cereal was there right on the shelf, the one that I thought had been missing. It was sitting right where I'd left it. I figured I just missed it somehow and quickly ate before heading to work. As I stepped outside to go to work, I noticed strange footsteps just outside my house. I didn't want to leave my house just like that, but I needed to get to work. It was still raining and dark outside. I held my umbrella and started walking away. As I was about to walk away, I turned back to look at my house. And what I saw there shook me to the grounds. The lights inside my house was turned on and the man from yesterday was standing inside my house, behind the window. I got freaked out and ran inside the house. As soon as I stepped through the door, I started hearing mysterious footsteps all over my house as if someone was running away from me. I froze at a point and called out if anyone was there in the house. But there was no response. It was quiet again. I stepped slowly to the entryway of the living room and scanned the room. I took a few more steps in and walked carefully through, checking behind everything. There was nothing and no one. I went back by the front door, preparing to check upstairs when I heard sudden footsteps shuffling through the kitchen. I turned my head and looked down the hallway. A man was standing at the far end, looking at me. He was old, wearing torn clothes, his hair was all messed up, looking straight at me with his eyes wide open, not blinking them for even a second. It was like my brain and body just shut down for a second as we stared at each other. I spun around and swung open the front door. I heard his footsteps coming up behind me as I sprinted out of the house and ran all the way to my neighbor's house. They called the police for me and let me stay with them until they arrived. Police found no sign of intrusion, but they found some disturbing evidence of someone likely spending hours inside my house, eating my food and everything. He had been living in the attic. There was no way to tell how long it had been going on. After that, I put my house up for sale and stayed with some relatives until I was able to move. I don't know if that man was harmful or if he was just living in my house because he could, but I could never shake the sight of him standing at the end of my hallway, staring at me with those dead eyes. I've always been fascinated by the internet. As a teenager growing up in the 90s, I spent hours browsing forums and chat rooms, soaking up information and connecting with people from all over the world. But when I stumbled upon the dark web, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It all started innocently enough. I was bored one night, and a friend told me about this mysterious part of the internet where you could find anything and everything. Curiosity got the best of me, and I downloaded a special browser called Tor and went exploring. At first, it was just a bunch of creepy websites and forums filled with conspiracy theories and illegal activities. But then, I found a chat room where people were talking about a game called the Red Room. They said the game was an ultimate test of bravery and could only be accessed through a special link on the dark web. Whoever completed the game would be rewarded with anything they desired. I scoffed at first, thinking it was just a bunch of wannabe hackers trying to scare people. But something about it drew me in. Before I knew it, I had clicked on the link and entered the Red Room. The game was simple enough, just a series of tasks that I had to complete. The first few were harmless, just things like watching videos and solving puzzles. But as I progressed, the tasks became more sinister. I was told to harm myself in various ways, and even commit crimes like stealing and trespassing. I tried to back out, but something kept me going. It was like I was being controlled by an outside force. Eventually, I reached the final task. I was instructed to enter a live video stream and watch a brutal murder. This was the ultimate challenge, and if I could stomach it, I would win the game. I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the link. What I saw was something straight out of a horror movie. A masked figure was viciously torturing a young woman, all while a group of people watched and cheered. I was immediately sickened and horrified. But before I could turn off my computer, the masked figure turned to the camera and spoke to me, calling me by name and threatening me if I didn't complete the task. I was frozen in fear and couldn't move as I watched the murder play out. And when it was all over, I was declared the winner of the Red Room. But I didn't feel like a winner. I felt violated and traumatized. And that's when the messages started coming in, strange, cryptic warnings and threats. I knew I had made a grave mistake by entering the Red Room, and now I was paying the price. I tried to delete everything and forget about it, but the dark web was like a parasite that had taken over my life. Everywhere I went, I saw glimpses of that masked figure. And the messages kept coming, reminding me of the blood on my hands. I've since abandoned the dark web and tried to move on with my life. But I can feel a dark presence constantly looming over me. The game may be over, but I fear the consequences will last a lifetime.
In the quiet town near Mount Desert Island in Maine, the rain falls incessantly. The glow of streetlights reflects on the wet asphalt as Jenna, a young woman in her 20s, prepares to start her night shift at the local pizzeria. Jenna is the quintessential girl next door, with bright eyes and a sincere smile. On that evening, like every other day, she wears the pizzeria uniform. Her mission is simple: deliver the perfect pizza, even in the pouring rain. The enticing aroma of pizza follows her as she crosses the threshold of the pizzeria, ready to face the rainy evening. The atmosphere takes a dark turn as Jenna finds herself reliving the incident from the previous night. She had delivered a pizza with the wrong ingredients to a mysterious customer. Jody, who hadn't forgiven her for the mistake of that incorrect delivery, her mind darkened, turning a simple misunderstanding into a dangerous obsession. As Jenna drives towards her destination, the sound of rain beating on the car's roof mixes with her inner turmoil. The foggy glass reflects her worried face, while the wet road stretches ahead of her like a path of uncertainty. Upon reaching the destination, Jenna steps out of the car into a downpour. The house seems deserted, but a shadow moves in the darkness. Jody emerges with a crazed look and a gleaming knife in hand. The reflection of the knife blends with raindrops, creating a surreal atmosphere. Jody, with a voice filled with rage, accuses Jenna of the previous night's mistake. The tension in the air is palpable as Jenna tries to explain, but Jody is already consumed by her psychotic fury. Raindrops create an unsettling symphony, accompanying the tragic dance about to unfold. Tension reaches its peak as Jody pushes Jenna against the wet wall. The sound of rain becomes a sinister backdrop as Jody raises the knife, determined to inflict her insane punishment. Jenna, powerless and frightened, pleads for mercy. Jody's fury-distorted face reflects only her obsession. The knife descends, and Jenna's world fades slowly with the dreams of a lifetime. The sound of rain and Jody's labored breath are the last sounds Jenna perceives before disappearing into eternal silence. The curse of the pizza, born from a simple mistake, has left an indelible scar on this small town in Maine. The legend of Jenna and the pizza curse continues to evolve, fueled by nights of incessant rain and the fear of a similar fate. The story infiltrates the townsfolk, growing in details and mystery, like the gripping plot of a horror tale that refuses to cease haunting the minds of the townspeople.
I never thought that TikTok could be so terrifying until I experienced it firsthand. It all started when I decided to join the popular app and create my own videos. Little did I know that my obsession with creating sexy content would lead me down a path of horror. It all began innocently enough, with me scrolling through my For You page and watching countless videos of attractive people dancing and lip-syncing to popular songs. I couldn't help but feel a little envious of their perfect bodies and seemingly effortless performances. I wanted to be just like them, to gain a massive following and become a TikTok star. So, I started creating my own videos. I spent hours perfecting my dance moves and editing my videos to make them as sexy as possible. And to my surprise, my videos started to gain traction. People were liking and commenting, and my follower count was steadily increasing. I was ecstatic, thinking that I was on my way to becoming the next big thing on TikTok. But as my popularity grew, strange things started to happen. It all started with a comment on one of my videos. It was from a user with a profile picture of a creepy clown. The comment simply read, "I'm watching you." At first, I brushed it off as a joke from a random troll. But then, I started receiving more comments from this user on every single one of my videos. Each comment became more and more disturbing, with threats and messages that made my skin crawl. I tried to block the user, but they kept creating new accounts and leaving comments on my videos. I started to feel paranoid and scared, constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling like someone was watching me. I even thought about deleting my account and quitting TikTok altogether. But my desire for fame and validation kept me hooked to the app, and I couldn't bring myself to give it up. One night, as I was scrolling through my feed, I came across a video that caught my attention. It was a video of a girl dancing in her room, but there was something off about it. The girl's movements were jerky and unnatural, and her face seemed distorted. And then I noticed something even more unsettling. In the reflection of her mirror, I could see the same creepy clown from the comments standing behind her. I immediately closed the app and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. But then, I received a notification from TikTok. It was a direct message from the creepy clown account, and it read, "You're next." That's when things took a turn for the worse. I started receiving disturbing messages and threats not only on TikTok but also on my other social media accounts. The creepy clown seemed to be everywhere, always watching and waiting for me. I tried to tell my friends and family about what was happening, but they all brushed it off as a prank or a figment of my imagination. They didn't understand the terror I was feeling, the constant fear that consumed me every time I opened the app. But then, things escalated even further. One night, as I was filming a new video, I noticed something strange in the background. In the reflection of my mirror, I could see the creepy clown staring back at me. I quickly turned around, but no one was there. I was alone in my room. I started to question my own sanity. Was I imagining all of this? Was someone playing a sick joke on me? But deep down, I knew it was real. The creepy clown was real, and it was coming for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I deleted my TikTok account and all of my other social media accounts. I even changed my phone number and moved to a different city. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. And then, one day, I received a package in the mail. It was a phone with a TikTok account already logged in. I knew immediately who it was from: the creepy clown. I tried to throw the phone away, but it kept reappearing in my possession. It was as if the phone had a mind of its own. And then, I started receiving notifications from the app. It was videos of me dancing and lip-syncing to songs, but I had no recollection of filming them. The creepy clown had taken control of my phone and was using it to post videos of me without my consent. I was in a state of constant fear and paranoia, never knowing when the creepy clown would strike next. And then, one day, I received a message from the account: "I'm coming for you." I never saw the creepy clown, but I could feel its presence everywhere I went. It was only a matter of time before it caught up to me. And as I write this, hiding in a secluded cabin in the woods, I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, it was never just a creepy clown. Maybe it was something much more sinister, something that had been lurking on TikTok all along.